Good afternoon. Welcome to the Country Education Partnership Pre-Professional Development Series. Today is the first session in the three-part spring series. My name is Brendan Ryan. Country Education Partnership wishes to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land in which our schools, our families, and our communities work and play. We pay our respects to elders of the past, the present, and those that will lead their collective future. So welcome everybody to the first spring session, and it's my pleasure to initially introduce the Chief Executive Officer of the Country Education Partnership, Mark McVee, to provide us with a CEP update. Over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Brendan. Great to be back. Great to see everyone here again. So just a couple of highlights for the CEP. We had the Education Minister, Carol, at a cluster meeting yesterday afternoon out at Amphitheatre Primary School with the Pyrenees Cluster. That was organised by the member for Ripon, the very active Martha Haylett. So wonderful opportunity there. The cluster principals all attended and got to raise a range of things at a high level, but also at OHS, talking about OHS buses and some of the common things. The thing I love, though, they all said how much they love the role as a small school principal. So that was a really important thing to highlight. And the Minister asked lots of questions. He was particularly interested around parent involvement, attendance. We had to explain how that looks a bit different in small schools with travel, with parents with appointments and things like that. So that was a wonderful opportunity. There's been lots of other meetings with key stakeholders. We meet with different groups. We had a meeting with the business managers group yesterday. So that's just a range of the things we do. And CEP have our monthly meeting with the DEPSECs coming up very soon. The Rural Youth Ambassadors also had their third forum in Melbourne, and they attended question time. Quite a sombre question time with what was going on around Murderfoot, Everton, that area. So slightly different, but they had a range of ministers and political figures come by them, everyone wanting a piece of them. And I'm told the minister stayed an extra half an hour because they kept grilling him with question after question. And they came up with a new design for school toilets in keeping with the modern student. And the representative from the VSBA publicly said, we will be taking this to our architects and looking at it, and they said, well, we'll hold you to this because you've said it out loud. And he said, well, that's why I said it. So that's exciting. And very lastly, a fantastic opportunity. I can see two people online who are involved. We had a principal's educational excursion to New Zealand last week, and I can see Tess and Fiona, who were both participants in that. So Brendan, I'm going to be really sneaky and grab an extra minute. Did Tess and Fiona quickly just want to give us a couple of highlights of the trip? I've put them on the spot here.
I'm happy to go first, Fee. The trip to New Zealand was fabulous from both sides in that we got to visit other schools, which is always valuable, and to immerse ourselves in the multiculture and to listen to other passionate educators. But we also spent an incredible amount of time with rural Prins from our own state, and were able to talk in depth about each other's schools and get to create deeper contacts and deeper networking within our own regions as well.
And Fiona?
I guess the takeaway for me was, I think overall we do some things better, they do some things better, and just seeing, the differences. I'd love to see their OHS documents because there were so many things in their playgrounds I would love, but the paperwork would kill me.
Thank you, Fiona. So one of the play-based schools in the morning, they had two great trees in a forest area where the kids could climb, and they said the only child who'd fallen out the tree in the last 6 years was the one who was new, and we hadn't taught him how to climb trees yet. So Yeah,
I
totally
like
different.
that you're not allowed to stand on a branch that is skinnier than your thigh.
Yeah, wonderful opportunity and those who attended. So hoping to have future trips to other places as well. So certainly I would encourage you when you see them to get on board. Taking enough time, back to you, Brendan.
Thanks, Mark. Some normal housekeeping. Today's session will be of 1 hour's duration, so we'll certainly conclude by 5 p.m. The program is, as usual, being recorded, so you have an opportunity to review the session whenever it's convenient. And I make the point that all previous sessions are also available online. If anybody has a question during the course of the presentation, please include that in the chat box and we will endeavour to respond to the questions today. And if we can't respond today, we'll certainly follow up. And before the session closes, we ask everybody to complete the poll, the survey. So feedback's very important. So please make sure you do complete the survey before you sign off today. Now, the focus of our session today is certainly financial management, and I'll hand back to Mark, I believe, who will introduce our presenter and facilitate today's session. So back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Brendan. We are really fortunate today to have a member. Well, I was about to say what his role is, but I believe it's changed. So I'm not, I'll let Rob describe there, but when he signed up to present today, it was certainly in his finance role with the department, of which he is an expert. Rob is a brilliant presenter. We've had him here before. The schools who've been lucky enough to have Rob there, or any of the team, just speak incredibly highly of the work they do, and also the various presentations. The team seem to get out a lot to network meetings and other meetings, Rob. I seem to hear someone speaking every couple of weeks. So we're really excited to have you today. I have stolen too much of your time already, so I'll pass over to you. I'll get you to just explain perhaps your current role and the role you were in when you signed up for this. And we look forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Mark and Brendan. Really appreciate the opportunity of being able to present to CEP again. I'm currently the acting executive director for the Mallee area. So I believe there were 5 of my prins who were on the trip over to New Zealand. And I'm looking forward to being able to have a good conversation with them about their and I'm quite hopeful that Danny Forrest didn't lead them to Australia whilst he was over there with them. I have to say that my normal role as a strategic finance management advisor, it's certainly one of the things which is the best part of that role is actually the work that we do directly with schools and support in the finance space. And being able to understand that every school has its own particular context. Our role is to be invited in. We're one of the few roles within the department which get invited in, and it's really on the behest of the print and the business manager. And we come in and we provide advice. We're a critical friend, but none of us would ever come in and tell you what to do in our role because having been a print myself for 18 years, I would have hated somebody coming in and telling me. But I love the idea of being able to have somebody come in and throw another set of eyes over what we might be doing or should be doing. So I'm going to try and cover in 20 minutes the hot topics at the moment. And being aware that there's a lot happening in the finance space in schools at the moment, not just the time of the year and getting ready for the indicative budget coming out, but also the changes which continue to take place. It's such a fluid space, school finance, and how we manage in that area. I would like to start by hopefully being able to go to the next slide, if it's going to behave itself for me. It wants to at the moment, which is a shame. I might go back to this one and go this way. Apologies for that. Just to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands upon which we're meeting, elders both past, present and emerging. I myself live and work on the lands of the Watchabaluk nations, the Watchabaluk, Yadwa, Yali, Wagaya and Japagalk peoples. And also acknowledge that the land that I work upon was never ceded, that the opportunities that I myself have been provided have come from opportunities which have meant the detriment of others. In school finance, we are a space within schools which are complex, things which we're responsible for as principals and as leaders in a school community. When you look at that list, the students, the staff, families, managing core funding, the targeted initiatives, there's over 40 different targeted initiatives now that can impact on a school's budget. We've got our governance responsibilities with managing finance through college councils. And then we've got also the work in terms of how we actually strategically use our resources. And happily enough, financing's coming out of AIPs, but we've still got a responsibility to target our resources towards meeting our AOP and strategic plan goals, and then thinking about the broader system that we work within. My first round of tips for you today is you can't know everything. This is an absolutely complex system that we work within. I gave my the person who replaced me at Horsham College when she was my AP, and she's now the substantive, and is doing a fantastic job, an outstanding job at Horsham College. I gave her the challenge of actually looking at all of the PAL tabs and counting up for each letter the number of topics, and then going to 5 of them at the number of resources. There was about 4,000 different things that she came up with. That's the complexity of just the principal advisory line, the policies, the resources behind what we do. So my greatest tip that I can ever give anybody who's in a principal role is that those who survive in it for a period of time, ask for help. They've got a great network, they've got a great group of people around them, and they're vulnerable enough, not just within the context of that network, but even within their own leadership team, to acknowledge that you can't know everything and that they don't know everything. Our jobs are educators. I came out as a history and humanities and then an Indonesian teacher, would you believe? I didn't come out $1 million business when I was running Horsham College. But what we do is as educators and as learners, we put into practice the things that we learn. And we are inquisitive by nature, and we work towards actually understanding and looking at how best practice works to get us to be able to focus on the work that we need. I always bring up the FISO 2.0 model when I present about finance. FISO effectively says that support and resourcing is 20% of the work. Often I think we don't put enough professional learning into the actual focus, and we do at times put enough time into being in space. And when you think about everything that we do around that FISO model, how we recruit our staff, the staffing structure we have, the leadership structure we have, the programs and initiatives that we target and run, it all works into that circle. It all works into the learning and well-being, which is the targeted work that we're focused in on. So when I look at the foundations of finance, and when we talk about it, we work in the grey from August, when we put our indicative numbers in, through to June, when we get our revised budget. So once we put our numbers in August, and our census data picks up our SFOE, which then puts us into affects our equity, but also our like school groups. So big tip, make sure in June, July, you are doing your background work with your family occupations and making sure that you're maximising your abilities in that space. A good tip is when you've got parent-teacher interviews on in June, being able to raise that as something that you talk with families about if there's been any changes. Could we please get you to update that and talk through how the funding works? Once those go in and we get our indicative budget, which will come out in the last week of this term, we'll then start the process of looking at what our staffing will be. Now, staffing, and knowing that the number one issue still for schools in regional rural Victoria is getting staff. The key thing for that is when I'm still at Horsham College, I'm looking in June for my intentions of my staff, knowing that they have until October if they're on long-term leave for me. But I'm really asking staff to give me a clear understanding of what they're planning for the following year, knowing that it doesn't tie them in until they actually formalise it in writing to me. The other thing I'm also trying to do in that space is I'm putting that, whatever out to staff with intentions, I'm putting it through my consultative committee. So I'm making sure I'm keeping them in the loop with the process. We get our indicative budget, we'll start work in terms of looking at what our program budgets will look like, what our cash budget will look like, knowing that we have to table a cash budget at either the November or December meeting. But we're not going to have a confirmed budget in terms of cash budget until February when we go through census. Then we'll have to wait to see whether we get audited or not. And then once we get that, we'll get our confirmed budget. But because of DI and the way funding works in DI, schools were still getting funds coming through in June. The revised budget became the final point. So what was a confirmed budget's no longer the confirmed budget at this stage. The revised budget's literally the final budget. And we'll talk a bit about that later when we talk through DI and the process there. So credit carryover policy is one of the big topics. At the moment, it's for specialist schools. In 2026, that'll remain the same. And then in 2027, it will drop down to 3% for all schools except specialist schools. When it drops to 3%, looking at your credit line that you get in your confirmed budget or indicative budget and taking away 97% will give you your 3%. That is not a lot for some. In fact, for a lot of primary schools, we're talking maybe the equivalent of what might be one ES or one teacher in terms of what your balance might be. Now, the impact of that is that schools not tracking carefully their DI funding as it comes in throughout the year can very quickly find that they're doing work which is going to create a situation where they move to surplus reduction, where they will hand money back. Surplus reduction is decided at the end of the financial year. You'll see it in your budget management report if you're in that space. And what will happen is come out until the following year. But what we want to be able to do is maximise our spending. So if you're a small school which qualifies for the small school deficit reduction, what we certainly aim towards is trying into that position of being in deficit to 40,000, so it takes you back to zero. You get 50,000 leeway, but we're very aware of the fact that things change and schools are places. It's never been a challenging time running a school, knowing that you could well and truly have staff at the start of the year and not have them by the end of the year because of the marketplace and the way that the movements are happening. Now, when we get our budget management report in today's world, it really is a different report we were used to, where that surplus line we used to think was the surplus line, and that gave us our overall position. When you look at this example, the school which has 3,296,447, that's the credit line from which they will work out their overall surplus reduction. They will take away 95% of that, and that will give them their figure. The surplus from the previous year adds on to it, though. It's not taken into account for that 5%. So you've got to be really surpluses and how you actually work your way through that. Likewise, surplus reduction, when it comes up, it's not going to come out straight away. And we would definitely recommend, if you see a surplus reduction, that you reach out to one of your SFMAs and ask to have a chat about how you might look towards managing that. The sooner that we're involved, the sooner we can provide advice and support. The actual structural position is on the second page of the report, and it's a projected balance line under the first table of credit. And that gives you your actual position. Accumulated balances were credit surpluses in 2023. They were quarantined, but they must be used by the end of 2027. So again, if you're got an accumulated balance and you haven't thought about how you're going to use that, reaching out to one of us in the SFMA role, because we're really happy to try and support you and give you guidance about how to work through that. I've gone through the credit carryovers, and this presentation is available to be passed on to people today and for those wanting it. So I won't go into too much detail looking at time, but I think it's one of the things, if you're seeing that surplus reduction or you're seeing that you're close to that 5%, it's really worthwhile reaching out for some support, because we've seen schools who have had DI funding come in afterwards at the end of the year and had to give money back to the department. Managed deficits are something where a deficit's not a bad thing. There's over 600 schools with deficits now. The key thing is that it's managed, and a managed deficit means that there's money put aside in your cash budget to cover the deficit. Now, that's a pretty simple process for you people to work through, but it's a much easier one for secondaries and P12s to deal with. Primaries are normally very tight in terms of their cash budget, and it becomes much more difficult to manage a deficit if you're in a primary school. So it is one of the things that we really strongly recommend. Again, reach out. This is part of our expertise in being able to support and manage. The schools which get themselves into real trouble are the ones which don't have that word managed in front of the deficit. Just rely on the fact that they're going to be able to pay it back the following year, but they don't have that money put aside. And that's one of the things which is becoming really loud and clear as we move towards a more challenging and fluid financial space, a very tight financial space, that you need to be able to be carefully looking over where you're sitting with those budget management reports, and your planner is your actual gold ticket. It's your ticket to be able to see exactly where you'll finish at the end of a year. And we highly recommend working your way through that with your school leadership team. I mentioned before about cash considerations, about cash and its role. In the SFMA space, we don't do a lot of work in the cash space. We leave that very much to the S-Flow team, which is a group of experienced business managers, and they're fantastic in terms of coming in and helping you be able to work through your position where you are and be able to make sure you're meeting all the departmental requirements. The one thing I would say in terms of the cash space, and I hope any business managers who might be on today take this in the right way, the principal is still the key person to make the decision about how the cash budget is spent. The principal is still the person which has the responsibility for the strategic resourcing of the school. The business manager plays a supportive role and an advisory role. The school council plays a governance role. You work with your school council, you take them along your journey, but school council actually doesn't tell you how to spend the money. They support you with the governance and approve how you're going to spend the money. Some principals get themselves into a little bit of trouble in that space. DI, I mentioned before, is I think has been a fantastic initiative and is part of what I would consider would be key work in a school at present. I think it's one of the things that if you're focusing in on DI, you're also focusing in on some of our most vulnerable and at-risk students. You're ultimately helping support your staff in classrooms with being able to have staff there to support those students who are at risk and who need that additional support. And you're also able to therefore be able to be looking at some of the system-wide targets. The key with the DI, though, is understanding the timelines, understanding when funding the process, supporting your staff to be able to have the time to do the interventions and the write-up of interventions. And it's also tracking the finance. And one of the things that we would definitely talk about is having your DI coordinator or DI person if it's not yourself, your staff member, they should be doing a fortnightly to monthly report of where financing sits. We're able to provide a spreadsheet which allows you to be able to track your PSD funded students, the funding they get, the staff member against that funding. We're also able, that would also have DI students, funding they get, staff member against, DI students, stage of process they're at. The key with it is, if you've got a great system in place, it's fundamentally changing the fabric of some schools. I'm seeing some schools actually go, and I'll use a great example from Conconjella Primary School, 24 students. The principal invested the time to be able to do the reports. He brought somebody in to back cover her for the 1 day per week, which was an investment. She's got that investment back tenfold. She's now got 8 students through that DI process and got close to $300,000 coming into her school. That's a fundamental change for her school in terms of the staffing, the supports, etc. I think it's just a great recognition of the work Amy and her staff have done. With the DI, the funding comes in stages, and I mentioned before about when it comes in, and that's the really difficult part. One of my Melbourne-based schools did a terrific job. They got more than expected. It pushed them to surplus reduction. They gave $100,000 back because of their DI. So tracking, making sure you're updating your planner, that so you can add your additional as it comes through, because your budget management report will give you what comes through to SRP, but your portal will have your updated figures as you go and work through. I'm going to move to best practice now, and one of the things I would say, and I'll be quite upfront, Brendan be able to vouch for this, being my long-term SEAL, I didn't always have these meetings. I had a pretty good idea. I knew the ins and outs. I knew the way it worked, etc. We are currently working in a much more complex place in finance than we've ever been. Surpluses used to be great. You could build a surplus, do some capital works. Build a surplus, target a particular initiative or capital items you wanted to purchase. We now work in such a tight surplus space in terms of the credit carryover. I think there'll be changes with cash at some point as well. And I think we all understand that we're working in an environment, in a state where there's a number of financial challenges. I say that, you know, effectively we've renovated the entire house at once, and that's meant that we've got to be very wary of what we've tried to do and what we've currently got available to us. So we would suggest principal, business manager at least. If you're in a school with a larger leadership team, I suggest it's actually part of our job to train the next group of Prins to come through to support them with this work. So to think about the SRP reports, cases reports, and other, walk them through what's needed, walk them through what's there, and be able to discuss that collegially about what we're seeing, etc. A really good process is when we do reconciliation, there's a great spreadsheet and flowchart there which actually outlines the stages of what you should be following. And as silly as that might sound to do that fortnightly, I'll use the example, we leave millions of dollars with the department for not claiming back leave when we should claim it back. So what we should be doing is making sure that the principal, when you approve somebody's leave, you know you've got the person whose name's against. You should keep that spreadsheet as part of what you do each fortnight. It's a much easier way to eat the elephant one bite at a time than trying to eat the elephant all at once at the end of a term, end of the year with the leave portal. So trying to do that, making sure you keep your time fractions up to date. One of the things which I think's really misunderstood is principal charging. It's where we find a lot of issues in schools. For principals away for 6 or more days on leave, you can put somebody else up into that space and their wage will come out of what is your regular expenditure for salaries. So it's a really good one to make sure that it's different to teaching staff, which is 31 days, or ES staff. So it's something which I think is a really good pickup and something we'd highly recommend. But the other big box there is the DI funding and making sure you're tracking it and following it, because we know it makes such a big difference in terms of your school and your context. I'm going to finish with effectively the SRP support that's available to you. All the details are effectively there in terms of the areas that we cover and what we do. All of us are considered experienced principals, range of different backgrounds, range of different schools that we've worked in and regions that we've worked in. The S-Flows likewise have had a range of different experiences across the state as well. We really recommend people go to the Finance Matters training to do some more in-depth stuff, and take your business manager, take your AP specialist or LT if you've got them in your school, because we think it's the more you have people around the table, the better the collaborative outcome that you get when you're actually dealing with this, and it takes away pressure. The details of our SFMAs and contact details are there. We always mention the famous Brian and Frank in terms of the HR. We offer HR support. Often Brian and Frank are under the pump. I can tell you that if you CC us in, we often will get a quicker response, just because I think we've got a great relationship with them, but they also know that if they tell us once, then they're effectively telling us 10 times for 10 other schools, and it saves them a bit of work as well. But the final thing I would say to everybody is understanding the complexity of what we're dealing with. I always say to people, finance is a space where you should not be worried. If you're worried, you're not actually asking for the help that you need. Everything's manageable. It's just how hard the decisions are. And our job is to support you to make the best and most, I suppose, strategic decisions to impact on both your staff environment, to impact on your student environment, but to also take pressure off you, to help you see the forest for the trees. That being said, I'll hand back to you, Mark, and I'm happy to take any questions anybody might have as well.
Thank you, Robert. Brilliant. Very a lot of clarity there, and great resource for people to have. Brendan or Tess? Brendan, do you have something for Rob?
I've got a few questions, to be honest.
Excellent.
Rob, I think you touched on it towards the end of your session. How important is it to have an established consultative committee or finance committee?
Brendan, I think it's, well, by the agreement, we just have to. And I think it's one of the things, I know it's challenging in a small school environment, but that to me is where setting up the structures around just take pressure off you as a principal, and it gives openness and transparency to the school environment you're trying to lead. And we all know that car parks and staff rooms are where the majority of questions which should be asked to you are often asked. The consultative committee, I think, is to me one of the things that just are fundamental. I'm a fan of the actual long-term staffing document. I think it updated per term gives you a good document to tell staff exactly what's happening, where things are at, and what's taking place. I know it takes work, but it's good work because it just provides clarity to people and takes away some of the issues which might come at you later. And look, to be honest, Brian and Frank hate me saying this, and Tony bugged it even more so. I've always used the AEU implementation guide for when I'm looking at the agreement. And reason being, it's bloody hard for the AEU to argue against their own implementation guide. It's aligned theoretically with what the EBA is anyway and what we get from the department. But for me, it's about, I don't want my staff to actually not work in a good staff work environment. I want to be true to the agreement as best as I can, but I also want to be able to make sure everything's done in the right way so we can impact on our students. People who get themselves in trouble with merit and equity and finish up fronting the board or getting themselves into trouble with their consultative committees are ones who don't actually have a clear process in that space.
Thanks, Rob. Brendan, before we get another question from you, we might just jump to Naomi.
Hi. I'm a really new principal. I'm acting in the role and wasn't really prepared for taking it on. I was an acting assistant principal. So I've been in the role about 9 months. So this is the first time that I'm really planning for next year myself. I'm just wondering if there is a formula that you can use to, like, our numbers are dropping. So, and I don't know how many teachers I might need to let go, or I don't have a formula for how many students we've got to how many hours. It's secondary college context. Yeah, so last year I took over in October, so a lot of that work was already done, and I just staffed the school. We're running a deficit. I staffed with who I had and what I could cover. Classes had already been chosen. But this year I've got to make some tough decisions because we are running, at the moment it's managed deficit, but it won't be managed if I keep running it as deficit.
Naomi, first of all, congratulations on taking up the role. And can I tell you, I don't think anybody's ever fully prepared for when they become a principal. As much as you might think you are, I think everybody holds the dart in their mouth and waits for the dartboard to hit you, because it is such a unique role. In regards your position, and what I would say to anybody who's new into the caper, I think the first thing I would do is I would email your SEAL to find out who your SFMA is for your area.
Yeah, no, I've worked with Matt McKittrick a lot.
Fantastic.
But I haven't seen him for the last few weeks, and it's like the burning question for me right now. I think he might be on leave because he just cancelled our meeting for this week. So
I've got a feeling he might be, but I'd shoot Matt an email again, and I would just say, Matt, as soon as you're back, can I book in a bit of a time? I'm just getting a bit nervous in terms of what takes place. In our base rules for how we look at numbers, in terms of context of things, the agreement says 25 is a maximum in a secondary space. You can negotiate with a consultative, but normally there's some other things which would come at play. If I took a class to 26, I'd talk to the teacher about what that looked like, and I'd table it through consultative.
Yeah, I do all of that.
In a smaller school context, there's a variety of things that you've got to take into play, because you also get particular funding to support you because of your rurality, the challenge of running a smaller school, etc. So you've got to think your way through about what works in your context. One of the best reports and the most underutilized reports, and I think it's because it sits under the subheading of business intelligence, and that's not something that's often a part that we go to. I think it scares people, the title business intelligence, is the trend analysis report. It's a 5-year report. It looks at your last 5 years, and it will give you an idea of your credit surplus or deficit. It will break down your entire staffing profile into what's been there previously. And what it's able to do is it allows you to see the trends. And one thing I've really become is understanding your trends in your school is a really important part of being a principal. So it allows you to be able to determine, I've got a smaller year 7 cohort or a smaller foundation group this year, but I've seen it bounce a couple of times. So I've got to do some homework in that space. I've got to talk to my feeder schools. What are their numbers? What's coming? What am I going to expect?
I know that next year we'll have less, but the following year we'll have more than we had this year. So, and this year we had a record intake. So I know that it's just a blip, but it's a significant blip on our budget line. But I don't want to get rid of good people, only to have to hire people again the following year.
And staffing's such a challenging thing in rural environments. So to make sure that you don't say goodbye to good staff, it might be a case of saying, okay, well, I've got to look at my cash side and see what deficit I carry. And I'll bring my program budgets and I'll tighten up in that space to wear that over the next 12 months, 18 months. And maybe what I'll do is I'll focus in on some of the DI work that I need to be able to help build and support the staffing. Because a lot of schools post-COVID have increased their ES numbers to support staffing classrooms because of the behaviour management challenges that we've all faced. But what we haven't had is the core funding attached to those students. And that's where DI gives us all an opportunity. I recommend the most important thing, coming to sessions like this, Finance Matters, catching up with Matt. The new planner will come out after the indicative budget. So at the end of the holiday or end of the term, it will have all of the different relevant targeted initiatives, etc., which will play out for next year included. as well as be set up. So I'd highly recommend, I wouldn't go overboard at the moment. I'd be looking at my numbers and I'd be working out my numbers going in and out. And then I'd be trying to say, okay, where do I actually think I'll be staffing wise? But yeah, very happy to try and link up if Matt's unavailable to you. Very happy to do a quick WebEx to give you some help if you need.
Thanks.
Thanks, Naomi, and don't be afraid to reach out to us. We can try and match you up with a live school, or we can reach out to Prince who might have been through that experience, who are happy to, people like yourself might even feel like a road trip through the tunnel. You just, yeah, we never know who's around, and people are very generous with things like this, so, and are often quite happy to go to somewhere different. But Brendan, you got more burning questions, so back to you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Rob, for new principals, dealing with school councils can be tricky at times because often they're very keen to know about financial matters. Have you got any key tips for principals regarding their dealings with the school councils?
First big tip is make sure you sit down with your business manager before either your finance subcommittee or your school council. If you have a finance subcommittee, or if you've only got a school council which does the finance, sit down with them and go through the reports and make sure you're both on the same page. Make sure that you both understand what issues might be there, and both be prepared to actually ask the question of what do we need to know from this, or what could be issues. So that's one really important thing. A principal and business manager who are on the same page in that space are enormous. Second thing I would suggest is always have a conversation with your school council president about what the hot topics are in finance for that meeting. So what are the things that you need to be raising and other? And if there's anything which might be considered controversial, make sure you've got your school council president on board and understanding where you're coming from and what you're trying to do. I think one of the nuanced parts of the role of being a PRIN is actually the time relationship with your school council president in particular, and being prepared to invest in that, because it just helps managing the conversation that you have and the story that you have when you're at school council. The other thing that I would suggest, Brendan, where possible, it's great if you've got a challenging situation to be able to say, I've sought departmental advice, I've had the strategic finance management advisor come in, I've spoken with other principals, and this is the pathway that they're heading as well. There's nothing more reassuring to a school council that you've sought other advice apart from gone on it on your own. But yeah, I think it's one of the things. I'm a very big one for about openness and transparency, and explaining the story. We're educators, we're storytellers, and council's one of those things that finance reports, we work in a really interesting space. We're we don't work. I had 3 accountants on my school council. We don't work in a normal financial environment. We work in an education department financial environment, and understanding that is, I think, a really important thing to try and explain to them as well, as a school council members. School council training is a really good space to be able to do that as well. But when you my one tip about that, make sure you go to that school council finance training with them so you can manage the ideas they get out of it as well. I think it's an important thing.
Thanks, Rob. 2 minutes, Tess. Have you got a question or a comment?
Not a question, maybe just a comment, and just to reiterate what Rob said, especially as a new principal, you can't ask for enough help. There's always someone out there that can give you the answers. And I know when I started out at Natty Alec, a school of 7 students with a business manager 1 day a week, I was on the phone to Mark actually just to say, which reports are the best ones for me to look at fortnightly, or how do I track this, or what is it that should be raising red flags for me? And my Andrew Perry was my finance person, and he was brilliant, and no question was too small. So definitely the advice of yeah, if you're worried, then you haven't asked for the right type of help. I still go by that.
Thank you, Tess. And just to wrap up this section, just in 2 minutes, and Rob, you may wish to comment. All I want to say, when you're a new print going into a small school, especially if you've come from a larger school, my big piece of advice is resist the early temptation. And what I mean is, you may come out of a system, a school that had a finance committee, had large groups of staff making financial decisions. You go into a setting where, as far as teaching and learning goes, if you get on well with the council, they're going to trust your judgment. So if you decide to want to spend $12,000 on a new literacy program that you always wanted to spend, but you couldn't get over the line at your last school, now suddenly, wow, I've got this opportunity and I can just do it. You leave in 9 months, there's a great resource. I've seen random things in many small schools sitting on shelves that a principal, well-intentioned, made a significant purchase, probably based on their expertise, their passion. So it's just to have that bigger picture thinking. Don't be afraid to work with your cluster. You might even look at purchasing things as a cluster you can share. Maybe you don't need them all year. But just resist that early temptation, that excitement of, I get to make these financial decisions on my own. But Rob, in a minute, I don't know if there's anything you want to say around that.
I think that it's great advice, Mark. One of the things I would say to people when they start off in as a principal is slow down. Most people get into the role and go hammer and tong and look at change so quickly. Take your time. You've got a 5-year substantive position normally once you've got the role, and get to know your school, get to know your context. Even if you've been there, get to know it from sitting in that seat. You don't have to prove to anybody that you're the principal. You've already done that by actually getting the position. So just take your time. I'm a very big believer in Simon Sinek's 2 pairs of shoes, rather than trying to sell 3 or more. Keep it focused and keep it very much on your core business for your first 6 to 12 months, and then work on what the bigger picture is telling you of where your focus needs to be to bring people with you.
Thanks, Rob. Been an amazing session, and I'm sure Brendan will give you some more praise as we finish up. We just want to highlight now the Term 4 series. We have a 3-part series around child safety. We've managed to secure one of Australia's leaders in this area, and Kristi is going to get into areas that are really specific to rural around child safety, with the basic message: you know a lot more than, say, the principal at Sunshine or Tarmeet might know. You know the kids, you know the families, and that works both ways. But if you see things that don't sit right with you, it's not as simple. It could be the president of the football club and a key person in town, and you want to be real sure, or at least follow your gut, because the ramifications on you as a principal of school could be significant. But as a little promo for Term 4, where we're really excited, we have a short video to watch. I've listened to a lot of her podcasts and find it really engaging. But over to Maddie, our technical expert, to hit the video.
One of the things that I truly believe is behaviour is another form of, and when children change behaviour or show behaviours that aren't ideal or are concerning, then we need to ask what is happening.
Okay. Let's say that your child has come and spoken to you and said that they've been sexually abused, or in whatever terminology.
Mm-hmm.
What's the steps that you should take? How do you break that down? Have you got examples, or just?
Yeah. So the first thing we should always do is thank you for telling me, or say, thank you for telling me, because I think, the best thing that anyone could ever hear is that it's okay to say what you're saying. And I know it's hard. You say, you basically tell them, thank you, you're so brave. And just check in with them. Are you okay right now? Do I need to do anything to make you feel safe right now? Because in that moment, it took a huge amount of courage.
Yeah.
Their actual mental and health their well-being and their health right in that moment is the most important thing. If there's a safety risk to the child right in that moment, then we need to get police onto it straight away. You know, if they're having to go home to the perpetrator, or they're about to go to the perpetrator's house or whatever, we need police involved straight away.
Okay, so it could be a shared custody scenario. It could be a child telling an auntie that she doesn't want to go home,
Whatever.
all sorts of things. So if it gets to that point, you've got to take
Immediate action.
Yeah. There's no excuse for just, well, we'll see how this plays out.
No, none.
Okay. The type of things that you should ask the child, or would you suggest, okay, if it's, you get a little bit of information and then pass it on to the police or pass it on to the appropriate authorities?
Yeah.
What's your initial conversation? Do you go for all the details?
No.
Okay.
You allow the child to tell you what they want to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as long as they are able to identify something's happened, the type of, you know, you don't need to ask all of the questions because the police need to ask that.
Yeah.
And, you know, if the child's forthcoming with what they're telling you, then that's fine, but don't get into, and unfortunately it's really hard for parents and people who love their child to not go, what did they do? How much did, you know, because that's if you think about, you know, in being interrogating them about what's happened.
Traumatized and also potentially contaminating evidence down the track. And like you are a specialist in that, interviewing children, and all different police forces have those skill sets.
Yes.
But it's a specialist skill.
Yes.
It's about not asking leading questions, letting the kid tell the story,
Yes.
creating an environment they're comfortable in, that type of thing. So get the version from the child, assess it on the information, the circumstances, and then take
action. Contact police. Yeah, contact police if it's something that, well, you need to contact police anyway. Come on, but a lot of children, when they tell someone, they just want to tell someone, so they're going to go, please don't tell anyone, please don't tell police, you know. And as an adult, as an individual who, you know, we need to make sure that children understand they've done nothing wrong.
That's such an important thing, because a lot of the offenders create that belief in the child's head that they're complicit in the thing that's been done.
In those circumstances where you're in a club or you're in somewhere that, you know, you see something like that, first of all, make sure the kids around you know that you're the safe adult.
Yeah.
You know, hey, if anyone ever mistreats you, does anything you don't like, you ever feel unsafe, please come and tell me. Because you know, if they don't know what to do, how can they go and do it? And then the second thing is to make sure that person knows you're watching them.
Well, I'm just thinking that scenario, you could walk over there because people don't want, and it's a horrible allegation if it's an unfounded allegation, but you could be walk in there with some confidence, say, hey, what's going on here?
Or, hey, you kids all good?
Yeah.
Like, everyone okay here? Oh, what are you doing?
Just put the spotlight on.
Yeah, just watch them a bit, just pay attention, let them know that you're paying attention, call out that, and ultimately call out their inappropriate behaviour if you ever see it.
Thanks. So yeah, really significant topic, heavy topic, but critical. And we really excited about having Kristi on board and the opportunity people have to ask questions as well, to be very interactive session. So I will be passing back to Brendan, and I guess coming off such a serious little clip, nothing wrong with finishing the session with a slight bit of lighthearted, but we're very professional here at CEP. We don't do cheap visual gags, so I wish everyone well for the next few days. I'll hand back to Brendan. There'll be no cheap visual gags here at CEP. Back to you, Brendan.
Oh, Mark, I hope you are eating crow. I'm sorry. Good luck. Look, yes, thank you, Mark. Special thank you to Rob for his presentation today. Outstanding session. I think the message about making sure people ask for help, and in particular networking with other principals, is a very important message. So thank you, Rob, and well done. I'd like to mention and a follow-up regarding Kristi McVee. As you've seen in that clip, Kristi has extensive knowledge regarding child abuse presentations, in particular online safety, and I would highly recommend that people think about enrolling for those sessions in term 4. In today's poll, which is available in the chat box, there is a question regarding Kristi McVee, and if you have a question that you would like to put to Kristi, then please include that in today's survey. That's important and give us some structure for those sessions that are coming up. Can I also mention that next week we have the professional organisations online, and each of the organisations will be discussing some of the important issues, structural and managerial issues facing schools at the moment, and their issues relate to all staff members, not just leaders, all our teachers. So I think that's another session that I would highly recommend people participate in. Can I remind everybody that today's session was recorded once again, and I think it's worth a review at a convenient time, and all of the past sessions are also available online. So thank you to everybody for your participation today. Thank you to Rob and all of the people that have hooked into today's session. That concludes our session today. Bye for now.